Hey Internet, I'm Chaz.
And I'm Dan. Welcome to Wine is Serious Business, episode 340 something. We're not sure where this is going to work into the mix.
Close to 350.
Yeah, but we're really happy to be here. This is we got an interview today with Ken and Erica of Walter Scott. This has been in the works for over a year, like many of our interviews at this point. We're here to talk about Pinot Noir and Chardonnay naturally. This is what you guys do, right? This is you got history. You got long history with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, right?
We do have some history for sure.
Yeah.
Going, me starting back at 95 at St. Innocent and
Was that your first wine job?
I would consider that my first, in the industry job, but
okay.
I was, waiting tables, and I decided to take a break from college and get into the restaurant gig and discovered that wine was awesome, and I went all in. I started knocking on doors and gathering up all the information I could, and I wanted to learn everything there was about wine, and so 95 was really the launching pad in finally harassing Mark Flossig at St. Innocent enough to get a job.
That's great. I've loved 95s. I feel like of the older Oregon vintages, of the 90s, that's my favorite.
And you know what? It was a rainy, wet vintage. My first harvest, I figured, if this is what harvest is all about, I don't know if I'm really interested, because it was cold and wet the entire time. And the people that did well in 95 made beautiful wines. And the thing about this valley is during harvest, we are usually picking in late September, early October, and we're going to get rain. But that vintage was kind of the end of a string of relatively easy vintages going pretty much 87 through 94.
Wow.
You had pretty kind of a warming trend. Talking with Dan Duché a couple years ago, we're cruising around Freedom Hill Vineyard, and Dan's like, we're in a warming trend, and I love it. It makes things so much easier. I'm like, okay, well, us winemakers kind of like those challenging vintages, but I guess from a grower standpoint, the easier vintages to farm.
I don't know that all winemakers like the challenging vintages.
No, they don't, but some of us who like the cool...
Some of you are just masochistic.
We are. 10, 11, I love them. They were cold and late, but, if you did things right, you made beautiful wines, and they just have this transparency and purity that kind of transcends, and really, I think in those vintages, you really get to show off what place has.
Magic can really happen in those vintages.
Yep.
We'll get to Erica's history after the first wine. What is the first wine?
Well, I decided to start with Chardonnay. We usually finish with Chardonnay, and I guess we're breaking the rules, but...
So
do you still want to do that? We're going to go back.
Thank you.
We can go back.
We can scratch and start with Pinot Noir if you want.
So...
we're going to go. Okay.
We have a dump bucket, right?
We're going to have surface tension here pretty soon.
So that's the whole rule of this show, is there's no dump bucket.
Oh, sorry, guys.
No dump
You
bucket?
gotta slam it. So
Un, deux, trois.
Sounds like our friends up in Calgary. So we're starting with Freedom Hill Vineyard Chardonnay. Freedom Hill, pretty iconic site. Coast Range, foothills, west of Monmouth, kind of heading towards Dallas. Dan and Helen Duché in 1982 decided they were going to plant a vineyard, and they did this all by themselves. And now their son Dustin has come back to help farm the family vineyard. It's one of the first families I came to know when I started in 1995, and huge admiration for them. And in 2012, some grapes came available from the vineyard, and I found out about it through Jim Anderson at Patricia Green Cellars. Like, hey, Freedom Hill's got some fruit available, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to go get some. And I called up Dan Duché, and he's like, I have 1 acre of Pinot Noir left, and I said, we'll take it. And so we go. I meet him at the vineyard, and we go cruising through the vineyard, and we drive past this block of single wire hanging trellising Chardonnay, and Helen, his wife, is out there kind of doing some shoot positioning, and on single wire hanging you really don't have to, but I think she just was having fun out in the vineyard.
Yeah.
And contributing her energy to the site, if you will. And he said, you can have that, and just name a price. I'm like, I'll take it. And so we've had it, since 2012, and that was the first crop. And so this is the 2015 Freedom Hill Vineyard Chardonnay, loamy sedimentary soils, a wonderful family, and a vineyard that we believe in greatly, as much for the place itself, but also the energy of the family that planted it and farms it.
And I just
go ahead.
Well, I just want to say that I think that in a time when we have a lot of changeover happening in agriculture in general, but also in Oregon in the wine industry, having a family dedicate themselves to another generation, have that family talk and say, our children are taking over the vineyard. They're going to be farming, and he is sort of pushing the farming and going in a different direction, and it's
he's
really
pushing
exciting.
organic farming and trying to get dad. I mean, they've always been pretty conscientious of the environment and how they farm, but Dustin's definitely pushing and exposing himself to other people who are, pushing the envelope as far as farming and sustainability and taking care of these, wonderful plots of land that we have access to in this valley, and it's awesome because there is that desire or urge once you get to a certain point. It's like, you know what? Someone shows up with a suitcase full of cash. We're going to take it and move on. And this family has decided to commit to passing this on to the next generation. And we feel fortunate to work with that family.
And it's really an accomplishment. I think for those of you out of state or those of you who aren't as connected, to know that Freedom Hill is one of the names you recognize and associate with Oregon, but it's not tied to one of the big AVAs. There's not a big history with Freedom Hill connected to a lot of the original players and kind of the if you'd say that, like the insiders of the industry, right? Like they really made a name for themselves on the quality of the fruit and the relationships that they built with their producers. Let's smell it. Let's smell it. Let's taste it. Let's make our amateur assumptions in one of the most in front of one of the most qualified somms in Oregon.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Retired.
Fortunately, she's very nice. Yeah.
My husband regularly says that my somm skills are dwindling.
They're still quite powerful.
Is that a compliment? Or, yeah.
Yeah.
See, I hadn't even thought about that. Now I'm embarrassed to talk about the wine.
No.
I'm just joking.
Think about when we have our customers ask for tasting notes, and I'm terrible.
Sure.
I don't want to tell someone what they taste because it's totally subjective to what your sensory memory is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And if I'm like, oh, this smells like tennis balls and grapefruit, people are like,
huh?
What in the F are you talking about?
My favorite tasting note ever when I was teaching sommelier courses for the International Sommelier Guild, one of the students talked about a wine smelling like boiled hot dog water. And the thing is that it did.
Yeah.
But there's these very specific memories that get triggered by tasting wine, and that's the most incredible thing about tasting wine, right? That it's the sensory, your smell and memory are so closely linked. It just takes you to places.
It's personal, and it brings up memories and thoughts of things that you've experienced. And when you smell wine, it's never always about just fruit. It's these other things that it reminds you of that makes it really compelling.
Yeah, and that's why wine is compelling.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It can bring up so many memories, like the aromas and the flavors. Mm-hmm. It's really quite dramatic.
The good news is nobody watches the show because of our expert tasting notes.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Yeah, but
drink what you like to drink.
Yeah, and it's fun to talk about it, though. I think making those connections between language and sensory experience is enlightening and fun.
Yeah, and wine is a beverage of pleasure that brings people together to share ideas and talk about things that are exciting, and it allows you through a little bit of alcohol to just kind of let go.
A little bit of lubrication through booze.
Yeah, no doubt.
It works.
And we're definitely there.
It does.
If you followed our Instagram, you've seen what brought us to this point.
Booze.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting about this site, when you taste, and I think it has a reputation for the Pinot Noir from Freedom Hill being incredibly powerful and dense, structured, lots of tannin. The Chardonnay from this site is very different. Mm-hmm. And it's shockingly different. It's ethereal and bright, lots of citrus, and very, very elegant, which is the opposite of what you think when you taste the Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
What I love in the winery is oftentimes we taste the Pinots first and we start, we end with the Freedom Hill Pinot because it's the biggest of the Pinot Noirs we make, and then we start with the Freedom Hill Chardonnay because it's the lightest and sort of the most delicate.
Yeah.
And tasting them next to each other is
There's
such
just
a...
like this underlying power and grip and density to the wine, but it's at 12.8% alcohol, it's got this like weight, but not heavy.
Right.
And-
Yeah, it doesn't seem, ripe or strong, or you're not getting these tropical flavors out
No.
of it. Like the citrus definitely shows, right? Like floral characters on the nose and things like that. But
Right.
Is this like gone through full malolactic fermentation?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, because like none of the sort of like buttery components, like there's none of that like in this wine at all, right? Like it's a little bit of honeydew melon, a little bit of apple, a little bit of white pear, really good like citrus, like acid components in the finish. We're drinking this completely warm, which is a totally not normal experience to me, so it's kind of throwing me off.
Yeah.
But at the same point, like it's so. It drinks really well warm.
The thing about tasting white wines at a slightly warmer temperature is really amazing because chilling wine can actually hide things and
Hide
it
the
closes the wine.
flaws.
And so when you taste
Agreed.
them at cellar or room temperature, you get all of what it can express, and there's no hiding anything behind that. So you get exactly what the wine is.
Yeah.
Any flaws, any delicacies, like all of it comes out at room temperature. So I always really enjoy tasting Chardonnay at this temperature, or any wine for that matter,
Except champagne and rosé.
except for champagne and rosé.
and you said there was no new oak on this?
Oh, no, there's
no,
quite a bit.
There is.
35%.
So I think that we're talking a little bit about
It doesn't come through at all.
I get a little bit.
What-
but
oak-
At least for me, it doesn't at all.
The oak should just frame a wine.
Well, firstly, Chardonnay loves oak. Chardonnay loves the interplay of oxygen with oak.
Yep.
It is a very important aging process for Chardonnay, and for us, with stainless steel Chardonnay, you don't get that development and complexity, and so it's from our perspective, whether it's neutral or new, that is such an important vessel for
It is.
Chardonnay. Chardonnay loves it.
And when you're picking Chardonnay at pHs close to 3 and alcohol and potential alcohols in the 12.5 to 13 range, which is where we think Chardonnay really
I
shines.
would say what you usually do or what you always do.
What's that?
We
we
at those
aim
ranges
to do.
that
That-
we aim
that-
to do all the time.
That's
Yeah.
what we aim for. I
Great.
think the transparency of place shines through at lower alcohols,
Yeah.
and you see what the place has to say, and we want our wines to talk about what the place has to say. And the thing that Pinot Noir and Chardonnay do really well is show off place and have this power at lower alcohols. And with Chardonnay, when you have higher acidity, lower pH as they go together, and lower alcohol, the wood doesn't become isn't like the centerpiece of the wine. It just frames all the good things that the wine already is, and it kind of carves off those angular edges of higher acidity and lower pH, and just gives the wine richness and weight without being intrusive. And what you want oak to do is only frame all the good stuff that's there, and complement the wine, not be the
Cover it up,
centerpiece.
not
Not
makeup.
cover it up. It's not makeup.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And the greatest Chardonnays in the world are all fermented in barrel, whether it's Ravenot and Dauvissat in Chablis, all fermented in barrel. Pierre-Yves Colin-Moret, Laflèvre, Lafon, Rouleau, Arnaud Ont, all these people that we're particularly inspired by, it's all fermented in barrel. And we have people that say, oh, this is all fermented in stainless steel. It's like, no, it's fermented in barrel, but the acidity and the freshness of the wine it does not trick people, but it's deceiving because so many people have been exposed to Chardonnay that has gone through mallow and it's got residual sugar and a lot of alcohol, and wood becomes more of the centerpiece in the wine instead of the complementary aspect to show off what the wine is.
And I think a lot of people also are kind of trained to, like, in backlash, identify that oak and even treat oak as a flaw, right? Like if I can detect oak, that's almost like VA, and I don't want it.
Yep.
That's weird. Yeah.
And also, yeah, like I like a little to even a fair amount on mine. I mean, I'm fine with some without it, but
And I think, like, what we really love to do with the single vineyards is celebrate and showcase the amazing fruit that we're shared with the growers that they bring us, and by not clobbering them with oak, and also they do go through full mallow, but we also do very minimal batonnage or stirring of the lees so that you really capture the purity of the site. And that's important for us, especially with the Chardonnays, to just have this very clear
Direct lines to what the place has to say, and the less you can interrupt that, You know, with white wine, you have not. There's no crutches. There's no tannin really. There's no color. So everything you do to it is magnified 10 times.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So, you know, Luisa Ponte made a really good point a couple months ago. It was a Oregon Chardonnay celebration meeting or Chardonnay technical tasting meeting, and she's like, I think oftentimes Chardonnay is a better voice of what terroir has to say because you don't have tannin and color coming in the way because it's like, as Erica said, this direct line to place. It's just the juice that comes from these grapes that are farmed from a particular piece of dirt.
I think a lot of Riesling producers would feel the same way.
Absolutely.
I
No
can
doubt.
totally explain
I mean,
that, or, hear that
Riesling,
because
Sauvignon
Riesling
Blanc,
for me
Chenin
is the
Blanc.
most easy vessel to
for
terroir.
sure.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, you guys being, you know, I mean, we all love, I mean, everybody, people that love wine love Riesling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. And those great wines really translate place. And those amazing places, whether it's in the Mosel or it's in Alsace or in Austria, they speak of what that place has to say. And
That's when wine can be truly special.
absolutely.
Pretty
And you know
awesome,
what?
yeah.
White wine is delicious. And there are people that are like, I don't drink white wine. I'm like, well, great. There's more for us. And white wine's delicious. And I think
I think I was saying something bad there, but I was like, you're a dumb.
people that love to drink white wine end up as winemakers make really great white wine.
And I'm gonna take over again here, even though we're gonna spend half the show on the first bottle. But Chardonnay is a big part of Walter Scott's identity.
Yeah.
If you're watching the show, you probably know that already. They were talking about how their production is going to grow. You said 50% in 2017.
50%. By 2018, it'll
By
be 50% of our
2018.
production.
We have a couple of vineyards that are coming online, a
Yeah.
couple of growers that we've planned ahead with, and so by 2018 it'll be about 50%.
A couple of vineyards I'm begging to get some grapes from.
Yeah, so both
Tenacity.
in percentage of production and also in quality, they've got a great reputation for that. I mean, Chardonnay is one of the cornerstones of your winery, and they're really one of the flag bearers. So you guys were responsible for starting the Oregon Chardonnay Symposium,
Oh,
right?
She with Paul Durant.
Certainly.
Nice.
So
All right.
really, the whole history was Paul Durant started it, Red Ridge Farms,
That's
and
great.
I came in to
Shout out
moderate.
to Paul. He's been great with
seriously,
that.
Paul
Yeah.
Durant.
And the Durant family.
He
Yeah, sure.
and Melissa Broussard put together this event, and I actually came in the first year to moderate it, but I believed very, very strongly in Oregon Chardonnay, so we ended up partnering the second year in 2013 and working together to sort of create this, and I think what we realized was that there was so much interest in Oregon Chardonnay and the future of Oregon Chardonnay that it just sort of spiraled into this much bigger
it's
event.
big. It's big.
And so we
Yeah.
went
As it-
from
as
like
it should,
having a couple
to be
of
honest.
people on a panel and then having a tasting afterwards to having this grand seminar, for lack of better words, and then this
Oh, it is. It's
great
true, yeah.
tasting that had over 40 producers each year. And so now it actually
40
got
juried producers, right? So if
Juried
you want to take
producers, yeah.
quality Oregon Chardonnay, there's no better venue, right?
And the
Yeah.
thing too that it got to the point where Paul Durant of Red Ridge Farms, Durant Vineyard is a very small producer, Walter Scott's a very small producer, and it got to the point where we believed that it was such a big conversation, an important conversation for our future, that it needed to be something that was driven by an industry board. So we had lots and lots of meetings, and then the International Pinot Noir Celebration actually took it under its wing and is now taking it forward. And it's
Yeah.
an incredibly honor. It's a huge honor
Yeah, big time.
as
Yeah,
being
yeah.
part of it that they would consider and then take it on. And then also it's exciting for our future that this storied organization of the International Pinot Noir Celebration is moving it forward.
Yeah, that there's
Sorry.
multiple grapes involved.
Dogs, babies,
That's
whatever.
okay. No, half the people at least watching the show are living the same thing right now.
Yeah.
People of comparable age.
Real life.
What's
Real life.
Chardonnay to you? I know we're talking a lot about Chardonnay, but Chardonnay's big to them. If you're watching these guys, it's because you love their Chardonnay too. So what is Chardonnay to you? Talk about a little bit about that.
Oh man, I think we mentioned it earlier, but
Yeah.
it's one of the, for me, one of the great expressors or translators of what terroir has to say. You can get power and richness without heaviness. It's delicious. Man, I think it's going to ultimately surpass Pinot Gris as the white varietal of the Willamette Valley
Not
/
soon
Oregon.
enough. Not soon
Yeah,
enough.
not soon enough.
It's going to take time.
I think
I
it
mean,
already is. I think.
Well, I
At
think-
least in Portland.
Qualitatively,
Rainbow.
I think
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think that with Pinot Gris is a great grape, and Oregon
No
does
doubt.
well with
Sure.
it, and I think that
It's helped define Oregon and bring
certainly-
people into drinking Oregon wine, which is
Sure.
a great thing.
if you look at just the DNA of Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris and Pinot Blanc are all genetic mutations of each other, so it makes sense that they all do very well in this climate.
Yeah.
Sure.
But when you look at Pinot Noir around the world, what is it planted with? It's planted with Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Champagne, Burgundy, all over the world, they're like peas and carrots. And there's no reason why Oregon can't make Pinot Noir that competes on the world stage. And I think rather than chasing trends, trying to recreate Napa Chardonnay or trying to recreate Burgundy, the exciting point about where we are right now is that we're focusing on farming and site selection and planting and farming with intention, and we are looking at how to define Oregon Chardonnay.
Yep. And Willamette Valley producers are comfortable in their own skin and playing to what the
Yeah,
Willamette Valley
yeah.
does well. And that is acidity, minerality, freshness, wines that display orchard fruits and things that are like really refreshing to drink. And it's one of the great things about Willamette Valley Pinot Noir is it's got tension and precision and freshness, and it's not heavy, and it's a joy to drink and expresses what places have to say. And Willamette Valley Chardonnay does exactly the same thing, and it does it in spades. No matter, there's a lot of people that are like, getting on the Chardonnay bandwagon, and it's awesome because the more people making Chardonnay and bringing more attention to what the Willamette Valley has to say, the better. And
Agreed.
I think it's having worked in the Willamette Valley and the wine industry since '95, I think this is the most exciting time ever in the industry. You've got a lot of investment. You've got, for me, the producers that have worked their way up through the industry and have put their, they're, putting their
Balls
heads,
on the line.
balls on the line
Yeah.
to start their own project
Yeah.
when they've worked their way up through the industry and they've lived in Oregon. They know what Oregon has to say.
And you have the pioneers who are not settling, who are
Nope.
pushing the envelope, who are keeping stride and
Pat Dudley and David
helping-
Adelsheim just like still being leaders of this industry, and we admire them greatly, and they're still like they want to push this thing forward, and we're just scratching the surface of the potential of what Willamette Valley Chardonnay and Pinot Noir can do, and I think sky's the limit, and it's
That's really
exciting
exciting.
times ahead. Yeah.
So, Willamette Valley Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Let's get to that Pinot Noir. What do we have in the glass right now?
Temperance Hill.
All right, another wine that we've had in our glass on this show from many different producers in the past. If we look out the window, right,
Literally
we can see some
looking
Temperance
at it.
Hill right here. One of the bigger vineyards in the valley as well,
Yep.
right? Like a lot of acreage farmed by Die Crisp. Thanks for all the hard work you've done and for opening your
Definitely.
vineyard
Go
up to
down.
many different
Go
producers.
Die.
I think
Die.
because that's a great thing too, right? He could sell it all to one large producer, right?
Yeah.
But he's made the effort to spread
Yeah.
it out and working to quality. Yeah.
So Temperance Hill is 180 acres,
Mm-hmm.
planted to about 120 acres of vines. Die Crisp farms it organically, and it was originally planted in the late 70s?
Late 70s, early 80s. Mark Chen farmed it for years. A lot of people were buying fruit from the site early on. Die Crisp took over in 2000 and immediately switched over to organic farming. Highest elevation vineyard in the Yola Amity Hills. So
Currently.
currently. There are some other people,
There's
Kevin
some-
Chambers planting at some higher elevations, and
Sure.
people pursuing those higher sites for cooling. But at this point, the highest elevation vineyard in the Yola Amity Hills. Di is a gentleman and a really talented farmer and absolutely committed farmer. Don't get him talking about other certifications of farming because he will
Or
let
get
you
him
know
talking about-
what he has to say. But he's
Strong
great.
opinions are good.
We
They are
get,
good.
we
Oregon
get a
industry,
single.
yeah.
So
They're good.
when we started this winery, we had this conversation one day in the cellar as I was helping Ken, and talked about what are the vineyards that we really would just be honored to get a bit of fruit from and work with. And Ken's list included Temperance Hill and Freedom Hill and also Seven Springs. And we had a couple of others in there as well, the storied vineyards. And that almost 6 months later, I was working in the garden out here getting my butt kicked by some roses, and Di stopped in and said, you need to do this, this, and this, and help me, guide me to less scratches and thorns.
The gentleman in
Yeah.
him, he stopped. He's like,
Like,
oh,
whoa. Where are your leather gloves?
Here's some leather gloves. Here's how you prune this. And
by the way, we have a single acre of wine from the North Block, or Pinot Noir from the North Block that's available, and he really loved that section. It's part of where his Lumos comes from. Josh Bergstrom and Matt Burson both get.
Lumos is his personal label, right? So he
Yep.
gets to pick any fruit from the entire vineyard for
Yeah.
himself.
and he takes some from North Block.
Yeah.
And Matt Burson makes a really fantastic
Yeah.
wine, which we've tasted not too long
Very
ago.
recently.
From
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
You know, there's a number of producers in the valley that make beautiful wine from Temperance, and you know, there's a signature to Temperance, but there's also diversity because there's so many different aspects to that vineyard. But
Yeah.
there is this underlying sort of
Savory.
savory aspect
Yeah,
to Temperance
okay.
that just transcends all of the wines that are made from that vineyard, and we're super honored. And
So Temperance usually comes in the winery almost a week later than anything
Yeah.
else. So we literally, most of the equipment is cleaned and sort of set aside, and then comes Temperance. And it's this, we sort of all have to get into the game and process it. But because of its exposure, it literally sits on the spine of the Eola Amity Hills. So the Van Duzer winds just come up and over it. You get these tiny little clusters, but sort of thicker skins, and we're in a really rocky section.
Sure.
It was planted in what, 1990?
1990.
So it's a much older section of the vineyard as well. So you have that,
don't ask me what clone it is because
No, that's-
nobody knows.
and nobody cares.
Nobody cares. It's Temperance Hill. What does Temperance Hill have to say?
Yeah.
And I think Temperance Hill carries a loud voice and a lot of power, but grace and subtlety are some hallmarks to that vineyard.
And when you released, so I went to the release party, wrote a bunch of notes, never published them. I'm sorry, but I remember thinking
You're
that
fired.
yeah. Cut my salary in half. I think
Fire me then.
Yeah, I think
0 to less than 0.
yeah. I thought it was really tannic at the time. It was like, whoa, Temperance is usually really approachable. This one I want to wait for a while. I'd let it go for at least a year, and it's been amazing to me that this is ready right now. It's really friendly.
The
Yeah.
funny
It just took a
thing
little time to
is,
settle down.
when you came and tasted, it was our release party. It's
Yeah.
March 4th and 5th, and we bottle in mid-December, but we don't have the luxury of holding the wines as long as we'd like to before we release them, just for cash flow, because we're a small winery. And so it's so funny because when we have this release party, we're sort of celebrating these wines, but they're like pissed off teenage daughters. They're so mad, and they're locked in their rooms, and they don't have any interest in playing with others. And then now
You got something to say and you don't want to hear it.
yeah, you don't want to hear it. And now 6 months later, they're sort of
Wow.
being nice again.
And
So
Sure.
they're hitting their stride of what they tasted like in barrel when we finally decided to put them to bottle.
yeah,
And
Right.
you know,
Because this is awesome.
thank you.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No,
Oh,
you
your
go.
turn.
No, it's just Temperance Hill a lot of times to me is like really easily accessible early on, and like the structural elements of this are definitely underlying the fruit, but they're still an entire part of the experience, right? Like the fruitiness is definitely there. There's a bit of like almost umami or sort of like a little bit of richness to it, but just like already of all the wines I drank out of the entire lineup as we prepared for the show, this was the one where I was just like, man, this is just so good right now. Like I'm just into this. So that's sort of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
That savory aspect, and I think that the obvious fruit component is, we're drinking the hottest vintage on record, and
Sure.
2015. So you get that kind of warm vintage, ripe vintage exuberance, but then you get subtlety and that umami thing, that kind of that savory
Right.
aspect that is something we
It's like somewhere
love
between
in wine.
richness and something else. I don't know.
And the acidity's
Yeah.
still there, right? And the fruit
Yeah.
still stays dominated by good complex strawberries.
Yeah.
With a good sense of depth, not
Yeah.
like really deep, dark, ripe, heavy fruits.
Right.
In any
No,
way.
they're like almost just perfectly ripe, but not quite. Like they're not
Yeah.
jammy or raisinated at all. It's just like this perfectly fresh bite of a strawberry, an Oregon strawberry.
Yeah, and it lingers well. So
Berries,
the tip
delicate
is
berries.
open it up, let it sit for a little while, drink your glasses slowly. That's what we did today, and we're really enjoying the experience.
Well, kind of slowly we drank.
Well, sorry, we got half a bottle left.
Until
Yeah,
the
yeah.
One thing I can say about
Yeah.
hot vintage wines is like this doesn't taste like a hot vintage wine. Like there are wines like '09 where you could end up with like wines that still had low alcohol because maybe they picked earlier, like they did something to it that still like when you taste them you're like I taste a little bit of that stewed fruit that reminds you of a hot vintage. This doesn't give me that feeling at all.
We did in 2015 have the benefit that Mother Nature's like, okay, I'm gonna give you, Mother Nature looking down upon the Willamette Valley, like, I'm gonna give you perfect weather during flowering. And we had a massive crop. So 2 vintages in a row, biggest crops ever. So those larger crops and balance in the vineyard. So, you know, leaving a little bit bigger crop out there helped mitigate kind of over ripeness. You could leave a bit more fruit. We're gonna be picking in September, so you could kind of delay ripening a little bit so you could still get ripe flavors without having that overripe, stewy
Sure.
character that we associate with those vintages that are hot that bring that overripeness.
But we also, when you look at 2014 versus 2015, 2014 it never got really hot in 2014. It was consistently right around 80 degrees. It was perfect growing conditions.
Yeah, and I
right?
don't remember it being screaming
No,
hot. But
it
there are a lot
wasn't.
of
In fact, we all
ripe wine,
probably
yeah.
complained that we didn't get a really
Well,
hot summer.
It went over
but
90, quite a bit, but not as many times as 2015.
the thing about 2015 was that the temperature was much hotter on a daytime temperature on average, but we had much colder nights.
The nights,
So that
interesting.
diurnal
Okay.
shift,
especially approaching
Okay.
harvest, that's huge.
the
Was-
diurnal shift helps retain natural acidity. So the 15s have this really stunning structure of acid that came from the cooler nights.
and it gives the wines a
I love it.
crunchiness. In 2014, we fermented Chardonnay out on the crush pad because the night we were
Literally.
like mid 60-degree nights.
Yeah.
Right.
Not so the nights were so much warmer, so less. I mean, the 14s are flashy. They're really easy to like, young, and I think the 15s
Agreed.
too. But there's grip and tension and freshness, and the acidity kind of gives them some snap and some real pop to the wine. So
Cool. That's great insight for me.
Yeah,
I've thought
yeah.
of 14 and 15 both as warm years. I'm loving to hear a little bit of that distinction.
Subtleties.
Trying to distinguish
Yeah, yeah.
those two because we're getting to drink a lot of them side by side right now.
Yep.
It's like really.
Let's
For
drink
me, I
another
think
one
that
side
the
by side,
15s
yeah.
really are going to demand some cellar time.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
They're more tighter wound, they're more precise, they're more polished, and they're going to need time.
Okay. Yeah, because I definitely have felt that the 14s have been more accessible
totally.
right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the
Yeah.
next wine.
Wine number 3 in the glass.
Yeah, so this is the Sojourner 2015 Pinot Noir from Walter Scott.
I have to
I'm just
catch
gonna
up.
go and pour myself.
Un, deux, trois.
I don't think we're going to taste. We're rinses. We're just going to go for it.
Okay.
Just hard charge it. It's all
That
good.
makes sense.
So Sojourner is
Sorry to. Yeah.
It's all right.
Right in front of your face. Yeah.
it's okay. It's all good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll just
Well,
cut
I
that out.
poured you.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Dan's
There goes our syndication
Dan's
right
okay.
there. There goes our syndication.
Dan's gonna get lit. All right.
Sojourner is owned by Denny and Thelma
My
Peso,
OCD.
a lovely couple who have actually been farming and or owning vineyards in the Eola Hills since the early 80s.
70s, mid 70s. Yep, 1978 was when the Muscat was planted on Eola Hills.
Okay, I'm wrong.
Wow.
Mom's right.
Wow.
Mom's right.
All right.
So Eola,
Throwing down.
Denny and Thelma Peso used to own Eola Springs
Denny's
Vineyard.
probably gonna correct me. Actually,
Oh, I'm sure we will. We always get corrected. So we met Denny and Thelma in 2010 when we started getting grapes from Eola Springs. And
When we started the winery, this is an interesting story. When we started the winery, we had a very clear idea that we wanted to work with Eola Amity Hills fruit, but you have to work your way into vineyards. So we worked with some pretty amazing older sites in 2009, our first vintage. But slowly we're looking for Eola Amity Hills. And Ken was introduced by Russ Rainey of Evesham to
I
Denny.
called up Russ Rainey, and so when I was working for Evening Land, and I called up Russ. I'm like,
Was
hey,
he still
Russ.
here then, or was he?
Oh,
gone
no,
already?
he was still here.
He was still around, yeah, and
He was working with Aaron, but he was still here.
yeah.
2008, 2007, somewhere in that time frame.
2008, 9.
All right.
Yeah, I'd say like
When
10
he
is when
passed
he
on the
left,
baton.
right? Like 10 or 11.
But he
left,
was still like connected.
In 10 early on because he was working for Evening Land and was actually looking also for more Eola Amity Hills fruit for Evening Land at the time.
Yeah, so, knowing Russ Rainey and his generosity, and for me, I consider him one of the greatest winemakers ever in the Willamette Valley.
It's very
and
good.
I will,
Turn me into a wine lover.
No, we
Yep.
we can say anywhere, right? He's one of the world's noteworthy winemakers,
Yep,
right?
for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely brilliant wines.
Yeah.
He admired Henri Jaillet, who's
Yeah.
regarded as the greatest winemaker of Pinot Noir from Burgundy.
Yeah.
So I reached out to Russ. I'm like, hey Russ, I'm looking for some Eola Amity Hills fruit. I know things are kind of tied up, especially after 2008 when we were looking for grapes out there, and he's like, yeah, you should call up Eola Springs. They've got a bunch of fruit available. So Sojourner, Denny had been admiring this piece of property for a while. It's on this beautiful bench. It's 15 acres, rolls south.
Well, that's pretty sizable too. Yeah.
It is sizable for sure. Moderately dense spacing at about 1,280 vines per acre. Looks right at the Van Duzer corridor, and when you stand there, and Dan has been there to help us pick this vineyard in 2013 when we had to pick it.
True.
And this is absolutely true, and thank God he was there to help, because we wouldn't have gotten our 1.6 tons that day without his help. But you look right at the Van Duzer, it feels like a warm site, but it's a cool site, and every vineyard has a certain energy, and there's the energy of the place and terroir and the dirt and the wind and the rain, everything that influences it. But the people, whether it's the Duchets or Die Crisp or the Pesos that own this vineyard, they contribute their energy to the place. And this vineyard there's something. And I believe
Energy.
there's an energy to it that I believe this vineyard will be regarded as one of the best in the Eola Amity Hills, if not the Willamette Valley, over the next couple of years. And we've made a big commitment to this vineyard.
All red fruit for them, or you get Chardonnay?
No, well, historically, so this vineyard was all going to one producer and getting blended away. And when Ken found out about it, Ken's tenacious, so he started harassing
The squeaky
Denny
wheel.
Cassell
I'm like, hey, can I get some
year-
fruit?
Good.
Hey, can I
over
get
and
some
over.
fruit?
It took us
That's
3
fantastic.
years, and the first year we got 2 tons. In 2015 we got 4 tons, and in 13 we got 2 tons. 14, yeah. So it's almost like 20 tons last year. Anyway, so
Is that?
but the
We-
thing
we-
is
we-
Is
that
that
You
cut?
can bleep it all.
No, it's all good.
Oh, okay,
but
okay.
Denny believed that, and started sharing this fruit with smaller producers who really are excited about the vineyard. So now it's being shared with a lot of different producers. They did plant some Chardonnay there for us. We got the first small
Nice.
crop off of it last year. It's one of the rockiest sites we work with. So
There's nothing wrong. It is like
it is so.
It is like,
well, there is one site rockier, but that's for another story.
that's another story. But the vineyard has 3 variations of the volcanic soil. So there's Rittner, Witzel, and Nakaya, and it runs through the site. And in various spots, you'll be walking through, and you're just walking on rock, and it's epic. And it's grippy, and it's reserved, and it kind of holds back. It kind of like hovers there. And when this wine opens up, it's amazing. There's delicacy and finesse, but this underlying power that it's hard to explain.
I feel like it's already opened up from when we tasted it prior.
It's the
Well,
last
going-
one to show up to
No,
the party,
it's going
and
back-
when it comes to party, it parties hard.
It's like going back to that teenage girl thing, right?
That's
So
like
it is it's the most pissed off, it's the most tightly wound, and then when it does finally decide to come out and play, it's so beautiful and refined and delicate, and just it's a very quiet wine that when it comes out, it just is. It shines.
Totally different descriptions of the same wine.
Yeah, well,
That's okay.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
it's your personal experience. but
Absolutely.
And I'm getting this
Full
great
person.
core of structure that's not heavy, but really suggests a lot of ageability. And I think I got to cozy up, and a
Like
lot
you're-
of
you're drifting.
and a lot of like roses. I think too. I'm getting a lot of floral component that
Yes,
like
very
red roses,
floral.
both on the palate and kind of when you're breathing it while you're tasting it. It's really
And Yosemite Hills brings those floral notes and those savory elements and those, people. Russ Rainey, so again, another Russ story. He used to talk about like, people would be like, "Oh, it smells like rosemary or sage." He's like, "No, cannabis." It's like, "Oh, that's the good weed."
Go Oregon.
There's a when people talk about green elements in wine, it can be like a negative, but it should be a positive.
It can also be a
necessarily,
sweet
yeah.
herbal.
Sweet herbal
Yeah.
thing.
Like
It's
where
like
it's-
when you chew on like tarragon in a salad or smelling rosemary that's fresh. It's sweet. There's a sweetness to it and a warmth to it that just makes you it's a comforting aroma.
And there's definitely room for it, right? Like even in the big popular juicy Cabernets from the late '80s, early '90s, like Blackberry Bramble,
And
like is all
eucalyptus.
over in the and eucalyptus is all over in that. Like green herbal character plays well into red wines.
But I think there's
Yeah.
that like bitter, like more asparagus, green pepper, sort of capsicum thing that you can get in some. But then you can also get this like sweet pea, like sweet vegetable. It's this not underripe. It's like this perfectly ripe greenness, like this
on the edge.
savoriness. Yeah.
Where you get something that's just like right there, and when you pick grapes when they're right there, there's still crunchiness, and the acidity and the freshness in the wine. When you go too far, it's like it's heavy and lazy on the palate, and it's just not very much fun to drink.
I sort of feel like this vineyard captivates for me classic Yosemite Hills.
Absolutely.
You know, it has this tension and this precision and this crunchy red fruit, but yet it's the same thing with Chardonnay. It's weight with weightlessness, right? It's got this power, but yet it's very delicate.
And I love this because for those of you who don't know, Erica has done a lot of work with the Yosemite Hills, especially in the past few years. So that's a pretty noteworthy statement, and I hope you enjoy. I hope you enjoy that remark. yeah. Good job, Sojourner.
The one thing I'll just say about this wine is it's really come around just in the time that it's been open. When we did the initial taste through on this, the structural elements were definitely in the forefront, and as it's sort of opened up, the fruitiness and like the earthiness, like sort of like almost like a dried sort of mushroomy thing is coming out on the nose and a bit on the palate. Yeah. It's really fantastic. A bit of like the forced floor sort of elements that we pick up in Pinot Noir sometimes. Really digging that. And the structural elements are still strong, but like they just help extend the fruit flavors on the finish. This is drinking great right now.
And of the four,
Thank you.
Yeah.
this is one that you can buy today, right? They can email you guys and buy a bottle of this today.
The Pinot and the Freedom Hill, the Freedom Hill
and the
Chardonnay,
Chardonnay.
and the Sojourner Pinot Noir are the two that are available. These two, unfortunately, have gone the way of the dodo.
I think the Sojo.
This came around, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
My tasting notes. I'm actually interested to read about my previous tasting.
So seriously, I'm gonna link their email address down below. But send them an email, buy a couple of these bottles, and we talk about likes or shares all the time. But if you want to support our show, buy a bottle based on the links that we put up. Nothing does more to support us than that does.
Absolutely.
So please get a hold of some of these unique, interesting bottles. Learn something for yourself. Support the show. Support Walter Scott.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Support these guys
Oh,
and
you
them
need
taking
some
time
wine.
to go and hang
Well,
out.
And hang out with us.
Chaz is like, I've already double dipped. I'm ready for second drinks.
Triple dip.
Yeah, so we're not fully hammered. Should we pull out the dump bucket?
Yes.
No.
No,
All right.
I'm already
Okay,
there.
un, deux,
Yeah.
trois.
Let's do
Oh
this.
wow. All right, we're going there.
All right, wine number 4. Remarkable.
So
this is
quick-
the second vintage of the. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
A quick story, just because
Yeah.
we're able to edit some stuff.
Absolutely.
So we were in Burgundy in 2008.
Good. Wow.
Erica and I had been together for about a year and a half.
Year.
Year and a half. No, it was in the spring of 08.
Yeah, so
Oh,
6
actually, not
months.
even.
Did you go together? Did you go
6
together?
months.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet that was a good time.
And so-
Wow.
We did, and
so-
we met Jim Anderson and Kate Bowling of Patricia Green Cellars and
Yeah.
Orient Wines on Broadway in Burgundy, and went
They'd already
tasting.
been there. They'd been in Provence drinking rosé. The weather was awesome for them. And then it
Jerks.
snowed every day that we were in
Snow?
Burgundy. Snow in Burgundy.
But my favorite story about that, sorry,
I had a better
segue. Veronique,
My story about chugging.
Veronique Drouin when you woke up every morning, the hills of Burgundy were covered in snow, and one of the most poignant quotes for me in my career was, if you watch throughout the day and you look at those hills and you see where the snow melts,
Where it melts first.
Where it melts first, those are the Grand Crus. So anyway,
Very interesting.
back to his segue story.
So the Un de Trois and chugging, really good wine. So 2008, we're in Burgundy with Jim Anderson from Patricia Green Cellars and Kate Bowling from Oregon Wines on Broadway, and we're in the cellar of Freddie Meunier, and we've tasted all these wonderful wines and
Amazing lifetime wines.
Right, yeah.
He was a little bit jet lagged, and he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I have to host some crazy Americans." But once he knew we kind of knew what we were doing, he was very gracious and incredibly.
I think that we started
humble.
talking politics, and then he also just decided.
Because this was just before the election of 2008,
So they were very-
everyone's like, "So who are you voting for?" We're like, "Obama all the way. He's amazing." Like, okay, now we can taste.
Sure.
Or maybe
That
we
can
don't
be cut
have
out?
to. Yeah, we can cut
Oh,
that
come
out.
on!
John
I imagine the people that.
Yeah.
So we.
Although I do love him more and more
we're
every day.
tasting, and I'm looking around, and we're in Freddie Meunier's cellar, and we're tasting Chambol Village and Chambol Fuselet and Nuit Saint Georges Clos de Marechal, and then at a certain point he's like, okay, it's time to taste Musigny, and he comes over with a bottle of wine towards Erica, and she's just kind of enjoying things and looking around the cellar.
It was
and
Emeruz.
actually, we tasted Emeruz last.
We were tasting
We were tasting Musigny.
We're tasting Musigny,
And then
I'm
he comes over-
I'm making out with my Musigny,
And
and he's like, "Here's Emeruz,"
and she looks around and she's like,
and I'm like, "I'm
well,
not
I can't
dumping
spit
it.
this.
I'm not spitting
And
it."
she
So
just
I'm like,
Musigny'd that shit, just chugged it. So whenever it's time to chug something, you have to Musigny that shit. So anyway,
"C'est un de toi."
it's a totally goofy
Musigny
story,
that.
but it was
Yeah.
one of those things. Since we all just chugged
That's a good
the last
memory.
bit of our wine.
Because you don't want to dump
That's a
this
good
stuff
memory.
out, right? If you
No.
don't have to. You should put that to good use.
Yeah. And-
but that's a lot of there's a lot of things that went into making that beverage.
Right.
So what's the point of it? Let's just put it in the goblet.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Send it.
I
Send it
totally
home.
agree with that.
Kira.
So,
Sorry.
we want to talk about Grand Cru. We want to talk about noteworthy vineyards of a region. Let's move on to wine number 4. What can you tell us about the Seven Springs Vineyard of Oregon?
Speaking of Grand Crus,
Yeah.
Well, we don't want to get into classification sort of stuff because
Would
that's
you-
politically.
Okay, sure.
yes, I
Yeah.
would. Yes, I would. I would say that Seven Springs is one of the top 3 vineyards in Oregon for me.
No doubt. It's definitely one of the greats of the great. You look at the people
Yeah.
that used to get fruit from Seven Springs, whether it's Domaine Duran, St. Innocent, Christum,
Evesham
Wood, Adelsheim, Rex Hill, the list goes
On
on.
and on
Chri-
and on.
Did I say Christum?
Christum, no, Christum.
Okay. Christum for
Bethel
sure.
Heights, I think.
Bethel Heights used to get Seven Springs, amazing site.
Penarash, I don't know.
Penarash used to get fruit from Seven Springs. It's a beautiful, beautiful vineyard.
It's sort of on the golden slope of the Eola Amity Hills for what we think of. Anything that's sort of east slope facing Eola Amity Hills, facing the Cascades, getting that morning sun.
Yep. And still getting the Van Duzer effect where it cools off at night.
Yeah, there's something really special about it.
I started in 95 and the vineyards I grew up on were Temperance Hill and O'Connor, now known as Zenith, and Seven Springs. And I had
St. Innocent and Seven Springs, right? Yeah.
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 And
Oh, yeah.
it
Wow.
was the flagship wine, and that vineyard to me for me,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is me, defined what I thought Eola Amity Hills was all about.
Yeah.
And that at that point the Eola Amity Hills wasn't even defined yet because it was just the Eola Hills. And talking with Kevin Chambers, he's like, I still have a hard time calling it Eola Amity Hills because my family grew up in Amity and I grew up in Amity, and it's the Eola Hills, and by the ABA definitions, it's now the Eola Amity Hills, which
And
is great.
that was something that was negotiated because of wineries
Totally.
named Eola Hills, right? So the whole thing with Chehalem Mountains or Ribbon Ridge or any of these ABAs, there are wineries that were named historically that, and so it gets complicated.
Yeah,
No
so,
doubt.
of course.
But this site, there's something, and Evelyn leased it in 2007, booted everyone out, all that business. But
Can we scratch that?
why?
Well, because they didn't boot everybody out. The vineyard was
They
They
turned-
leased the entire thing.
the vineyard was for sale.
They turned it into a
I
monopoly.
was getting to that.
And-
essentially.
No, I know, but like that's a negative connotation. And the thing was, it's
Agreed.
a business transaction, right? So
Yeah.
like anybody could have bought it. Anybody could have bought it, but
I was moving into that. I wasn't going to like leave everyone hanging. So
you're leaving here.
This is a good explanation of it, though.
So the vineyard was leased by Evening Land,
Sure.
and they, effectively took over control of the vineyard and decided to make all the wine from that site. But the
Right.
vineyard had been for sale for a while, and
Yeah.
the
no one
thing,
stepped up.
No one has stepped up.
There were wineries that decided to plant their own vineyards and build their own wineries, and so as much as it was a bad thing, and some of us felt like they were taking something away, they invested a lot of money into farming that vineyard to a really
Incredible
high
money.
standard.
Agreed.
Biodynamically, they re-trellised all the stuff that was single wire hanging.
Cut
They
trunks,
ripped out
put in trellising.
they ripped out phylloxerated vines and did all these wonderful things to a site that is a Willamette Valley treasure.
Yeah, and I would
And-
say that's the kind of care that wouldn't necessarily happen today if somebody bought out a vineyard of that size, right?
Probably not.
Yeah.
I think some people like take everything they can from something, and then when it's done, then they'll replant it. But it's a really special vineyard, and
And it turned out well. That's another
Turned out
thing.
well.
I'm actually going to argue that point.
Okay,
And
okay.
sorry, just a little bit, because I
Yeah.
think that there is actually a lot of money coming into these older sites, whether it's, Capra Company bought Chehalem Mountain Vineyard and also Yellow Springs, and the first thing they did is pull out all the phylloxerated blocks and replanted them. And I think we saw that with Evening Land as well. And so I think it's weird because I think maybe in some cases you don't make a lot of money farming vineyards. A lot of the value that comes in that land is when you sell it. And so I think some of these families had come up to this point where either their children are going to take it over or they're going to sell it. And when they sold it, that's when they made their nest egg, right?
Sure.
And so that's when these other places with more money came in, and that's when they invested into them. And money that some of these places, these vineyards didn't have to reinvest into replanting huge sections. I mean, we watched it with Dye at Temperance Hill. Dye has slowly, methodically replanted these phylloxerated blocks, and the Castiles with the Bethel Heights estate, they have been planning for these sections to get pulled out. Thankfully, the way that Mimi and Ted have been farming have been really supplementing these blocks, and it has lengthened out the time
Yeah, they
that
still have a lot of
they're
them
still
with
producing,
fruit.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really impressive.
But
Yeah,
and
almost
with
living
phylloxera,
cohesively with phylloxera
yeah.
by making the vine stronger through better farming.
but the amount
And
of
that was one of the things that was really exciting about.
the amount of investment it takes to rip out and replant a section is massive. And when you're coming to the end of some of these relationships with owners in the land, they're not in a position to put that money in.
Sure, I wouldn't.
And so
right? I
we're
mean,
actually
yeah.
seeing that with some of these iconic vineyards are changing hand, and then the investment's coming in. Which-
Interesting.
yeah.
So how did you guys come into Seven Springs Fruit for it so long being sort of a Evening Land only thing?
That's a great
Now
question.
So-
it's being sold out like you and maybe some other people are doing Seven Springs, or is
So-
it just you guys?
No, there are definitely other people getting fruit from Seven Springs, which is awesome, because it was kind of that Burgundian model of seeing a vineyard expressed through multiple hands is really exciting. So I was lucky to work with Seven Springs at St. Innocent for a number of years. I worked for Evening Land for 2 years, and through a relationship, some of my best friends, Ian Birch and Ryan Hannaford, were still working at Evening Land, and
There was a major management shakeup where Raj Parr and Sashi Mormon came in, and they took over control of Evening Land and started managing it.
and managing
And-
Evening Land, Oregon.
And Raj really wanted to bring the vineyard back to its roots, and he really respected the fact that the reputation was built on sharing the fruit.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Shay.
Thanks for
I
bringing
mean,
that up.
look
Yeah,
at all
that's
the
really
people
cool.
that Seven Springs was defined by guys like, Adelsheim did the first single vineyard bottling, and then Rex Hill and all the people we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That vineyard was defined by the people that turned it into a single vineyard bottling,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Raj wanted to, through Evening Land, be part of the community, so he
And
offered the
celebrate
fruit.
the historic nature of that vineyard and the way that it was
Absolutely.
That's
built.
cool.
Yeah,
That's cool.
And thinking of like Bien Nacido in California, where he's from California, so he sees that vineyard expressed through multiple hands. So
Right.
he wanted people to be able to show off what the vineyard has to say through their own vision. And so he offered in 2014 to sell fruit to a few people, and we were luckily
Very
enough
honored.
very honored. I mean, I've experienced so many vintages with that vineyard. I love it. It's one of the vineyards I grew up on, and for them to offer us fruit, I was like, I'll take whatever I can get.
And pay whatever it takes.
Whoa, shh. So we were lucky enough to get some fruit from Seven Springs in 2014.
Ken was like a kid in a candy factory. When the fruit showed up on the crush pad, there's pictures of him just like beaming, and he's like bouncing around and touching it, and tasting it, and like petting. It was
and
amazing.
for me, it's in working with vineyards like that,
It's very cyclical, the whole thing.
You owe a debt of gratitude to the people that planted those vineyards, to the pioneers that came to Oregon and didn't know anything. I mean, we believe in the Willamette Valley and all the people that like created this industry that we have and are very grateful for it. But man, getting access to that fruit, I was like, oh my god.
Did it taste like it did when you worked with it before?
Better.
Did the memories come back?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
So the thing about two things.
I had a, working with Mark at St. Innocent, there was a way that he handled that fruit, and I knew how that was, but again,
in your head, you're always like, oh, if I ever had this to myself.
If I had this to myself,
but
I wanted to.
But you also got to play with that fruit for 2 years at Evening Land. So
and
it's a very different approach to
before
that
I
fruit.
got my own fruit from that site, who did I call again? Sorry, we're Russ Rainey again. I'm like, hey Russ, how did you handle your fruit?
That's so cool.
It's a different perspective.
But also because the block that we were very lucky to get was one of the original
from his blocks.
Was one of the original blocks in the lower section
planted
that was
in 1982.
And it was it was originally single wire hanging pomard, but had been retrellised.
Yep.
And we were getting that, and so Ken said the person that I know that was getting fruit, essentially the closest to that was Russ, and so he called Russ.
And
like,
Russ
hey,
is going to
Russ.
answer all the questions.
Yeah.
Oh my
and I'm
God,
like,
yeah.
how did you handle your fruit? And basically what he told me
That's
was
awesome.
kind of what I expected with one little twist. And we, you learn by exposing yourself to people that are smarter than you, and you ask questions and you listen.
Truth.
And,
Be
part
humble
of
and do
having a
that.
great conversation with someone is
Yep.
listening. And
Yep.
it's important in everything you do. And we've been able to do what we do by being surrounded by and exposing ourselves and being lucky to work with people that are amazing and been willing to share what they know with us.
And valuing those relationships too.
Absolutely.
That's not trivial. You got to do it.
Seriously.
You got to do it. Yeah.
It's
So we got
It's everything.
one block for 2014 and 2015. We got a single block, 1 acre. It's 400 vines per acre. So when
475.
475, excuse me. So when you think about how Oregon is planted nowadays, the average vineyard is closer to 1,800 vines per acre. So you can literally drive a Cadillac through the vines in this block. And we also, it was Fox rated. And so Ken knew the crew so intimately from working with Seven Springs and Evening Land that we worked with them to really drop anything that had phlox-rated stress, because the block has phloxera, and so we dropped
Focus
any
on
fruit.
those really healthy vines. 'cause
And you can
it's
see that in the grapes too.
You can see the vines.
You can see in the vines when you've
And
got
they're
phloxerated
struggling.
vines. You have
short shoots.
short shoots that are
Okay.
and there's no way
It's
that
very clear that the vine is
a
struggling.
growing shoot that has 2 clutches on it is going to be able to ripen that. And there's a stress character that comes through, and
So you just drop all that. You're not greedy. You drop anything that's stressed, anything that might cause off flavors, and then you just take the best of it.
Yeah.
And so we literally had 125 cases of this. So it was
and
tiny.
so grateful to be able to work with this
So
iconic
grateful.
vineyard.
And is this retail anywhere right now that you're aware of, or is it gone? Just
Well, I
gone,
mean,
gone?
maybe online. I don't know. Online.
Maybe online. Google it, see what you can find. But the real trick is, if you want to get wine like this, get on their email list.
Yeah.
They sell futures of everything. There's not a single bottle that they produce that, maybe that's not quite true.
fully
Almost
exclusive?
everything you produce, you can send an email. They offer it to you at futures. You can get it
No,
shipped to
everything-
you. Is it
everything's offered on
100%?
Futures, yeah.
There we go. So allocation can be tough on some of this stuff, but if you're on the futures list, you can get whatever you want. I get some every year. I recommend you do the same. Yeah. No, but it's true. When you make how much of this was it again?
125 kids.
Right,
doses.
right. So if you think you can show up 4 months after the fact, right, one of Oregon's unique vineyards from a well-respected producer, you can't get that late. Get it early. Get in. Yeah. How's it tasting?
Yeah, it's super open already. This was, when we were tasting through this big lineup, it was like, this was one of the more open wines initially. Like there's like this big like sort of spice component, a bit of cedar in the nose that like is really kind of captivating. One thing that like sticks out for me as far as terroir and the Eola Amity is like a sort of clay muddiness or earthiness.
Yeah.
I get a bit of that in this, which is like one of the things I get in a lot of Seven Springs wines. Really compelling. Like and like with the fruitiness, like and like the tannic structure and the acidity, like it's all just really well put together currently. Like it's actually very, very drinkable now. But this is also one where like everything's so balanced. Like this is what I want to age. But I wouldn't be afraid to drink it right this second as well.
Go ahead.
No. That clay descriptor is really apt and I think really noteworthy. I'm getting good red fruit on it, and I'm thinking earthy character, but it's not like the forest floor earth. It's not like the of the Dundee Hills, right? It's not like the dark black earth of Yamhill Carlton. It really is something distinct. That clay descriptor is really noteworthy. There's a good smoky character of the fruit, a good sense of depth. This is definitely one of their premier, premium bottles, and it definitely tastes like it.
You know, when people talk about old vines, for me, there is this power and density that come with old vines, and this is ungrafted, unrooted vines.
Wow.
And all of the weather elements that come through during a vintage don't affect old vines quite so dramatically as they do younger vines, because they're more set in the ground. Their roots go deeper, and so when you get rainstorms, they don't suck up as much water. When you get heat spells, they're more prepared for it. And there's just this power that comes and layered that comes from old vines, and we talk about it all the time. We sort of joking around.
Old
Anyone
vines
who
are like
says
very patient.
they're very patient. Patience is an incredible.
Old vines are like they're walking down the hill slowly and allowing the fruit. They're ripening the fruit slowly.
But they also require patience, right?
Okay.
So in the cellar, like once you pick them and you make wine from them, they require patience as they unfold. And it's a pretty, anyone who says that old vines don't matter, it's because they don't have any.
Well, that's my line. I use that all the time. So as you were saying, the accessibility,
and the balance, right? Like the overall balance of the wine.
Balance. A wine is either balanced or it's not. And Henri Jaillet, who I've mentioned, there's a couple of people I keep mentioning all the time, and there's a lot of people I respect in this industry, and
I'm sorry you can't call him for advice. That's too bad.
I can't anymore. I would sure like to taste some of those wines. But, if a wine is balanced, it's always going to be good to drink, and it's going to age really well, like you said.
Right.
But you want to see what it's going to transform and become over time.
Agreed.
And that's part of the fun in cellaring wines, is that you get to see it evolve and grow much like you would a kid, and the wine just ages and evolves, and balance is the key.
It is. For a long time when I was first getting interested in wine, a lot of times I was sort of sold off, and I think by salespeople, that like, it's overly tannic and that'll just relax with age. And what I'm discovering as I get older is, and then I've done this more often, is that when you find those wines that are like, maybe they're like very structurally powerful, but they've got like the fruit to back it all up, and the acid is all there, like, you can call them balanced, but like it's like turned to 11 as those age. Right. So we got to taste a lot of good wines here with Ken and Erica, and oh god, sorry.
No, this is a great opportunity. We can't wait for the next one. We had a good time. Chaz is still really attached to the question of the day, so we'll give you guys the opportunity.
Yeah, so if you had a question to ask of the internet, this could be wine lovers, this could be about sports, this could be cars, it could be about anything.
Oh, shoot.
It could be about kids. What would you ask the internet?
Trailblazers,
yeah.
No.
He doesn't want to
That's
talk
what we
about
did last
Trailblazers.
time.
Ken
That's
doesn't
what
want
we
to
did
talk
last
about
time.
I don't want to talk about Trailblazers, but how about will the Cavaliers win it in 5, or will they choke? I mean, will the Warriors?
Oh, yeah, cut that and let's start over.
You're gonna have to
This
remember
one's going to air after this is decided. By the way.
How do you feel about Oregon Chardonnay?
That's a good
That's
question.
actually a good
How
question,
do you
too.
feel about Willamette Valley Chardonnay?
Yeah, because it's really, people don't say, oh, I really like French Chardonnay. It's like, you like white Burgundy, and that is a tiny little sliver. You know, we've been promoting, you know, Oregon Pinot Noir, Oregon Chardonnay, but it's really the Willamette Valley that's going to, I'm going to quote Roland Souls,
That's great.
it's going to help redefine what people think Chardonnay is about.
I'm already drunk. There's no going back.
I'm actually feeling quite good.
Are we cooking? Are we cooking?
Yeah, we're
Are we
live.
cooking with fire?
oh,
Are we
we're-
cooking with
A
fire?
little bit of hand imported. I don't know how you say that in Spanish, but
What are you doing?
Mezcal de Puigmontre. Thanks, Papa. Love you. It's from a tiny little distillery
God,
in
that's
Puebla. All Tobala.
Really? Did you just...
that's fantastic.
Mezcal's amazing. This is delicious.
Can't wait to be in Mexico.
Jelly. Jelly. And that's all for me. Cheers. We'll see you guys next
Here's
time.
the jazz.
Adios. Adios.
Adios.